Catalyst, Chapter 3. Tebo didn't have a plan when he killed his father. He did, however, have a plan when he got rid of his body. Tebo rose with the sun that morning, back aching as he lifted himself from the damp wood of the park bench. It was freezing. He shivered as he stood up, joints cracking and popping more than they usually would. He stretched, muscles aching as he lifted his arms above his head and rose up to the tip of his toes. He wasn't sure what time it was exactly, but judging by the sun's position in the sky, it couldn't be later than 6 in the morning. 1 full day had passed since Schlatt had died. Tebo decided, as he made his way back home, that he should probably figure out what to do with the body that was hopefully still sitting in the living room. He would need to get rid of any and all evidence that pointed to the murderer being Tebo, mostly as a safety precaution in case someone actually found Schlatt's body. Tebo rules out all the people who could realistically discover Schlatt, Quackity being the first one, although he was quickly ruled out as a threat because as far as Tebo was concerned, Quackity was also on the brink of killing Schlatt himself and likely wouldn't be too miffed if he found out Schlatt was dead. The next person who could feasibly find him was the owner of the apartment himself, who may be performing maintenance or searching for the root of a nasty smell, although he was also ruled out as well because if Tebo knew anything about the owner, it was that he didn't give 2 shits about anything. In fact, he barely gave 1 shit about anything. The final person, of course, was the police, which were undoubtedly a threat, but one Tebo hoped he could avoid for as long as possible, if not for the rest of his life. There was also the process of getting rid of all the evidence. He would need to burn his bloodied clothes, dispose of the broken glass bottle he used as a weapon, get rid of all the blood on the carpet and couch, and get rid of the body itself. Now, leaving all those items to rot in the apartment probably wasn't the greatest idea, but to be fair, Tebo wasn't necessarily thinking properly last night, so planning and thinking ahead weren't something that even crossed his mind. Now, with those 2 things in mind, Tebo could begin scheming. The plan was fairly simple. He would perform the disposal around 4 in the morning, one of the quietest hours of the night. Tebo would empty the suitcase they used as a wardrobe and place Schlatt, as well as the other evidence, inside of it. Tebo would then do his best to clean the carpet and couch, maybe toss some bleach on it if he felt so inclined. Once that was done, Tebo would bring the suitcase outside and toss it into the trunk of Schlatt's car. He would use the excuse of having to catch a flight if anyone asked him about it. Then, to finish it off, Tebo would drive the car into a river. Whether or not Tebo would get out of the sinking car would be a last-minute decision. The plan was mostly foolproof. Tebo woke from his futile attempts of sleep to the sound of an alarm blaring from his phone. Tebo rolled over on the mattress, laying on the floor, turning off the alarm. The screen displayed a bright 3:55 a.m. He sat up, taking a deep breath. Every move would have to be flawless for this to work well. He couldn't mess up. There was no room for error. There was never room for error. This night would dictate the outcome of Tebo's life, whether he would spend it in prison or in misery. Free misery. Tebo emptied the clothing from the large dark blue suitcase in the corner of his bedroom. He then dragged the suitcase into the living room, knowing that bodies are heavier when they're dead, and not wanting to do so much heavy lifting just yet. He parked the suitcase in front of Schlatt's body, limbs positioned identical to the moment he dropped dead, everything still in its exact place. Tebo then lifted each limb and tucked it into the suitcase, packing Schlatt as tight as possible, definitely breaking some bones in the process. But Schlatt wasn't alive to feel it, so Tebo really didn't care. Not that it made a difference whether or not Schlatt was dead or alive. With Schlatt tucked away in the suitcase and an ungodly amount of blood pooling inside it, Tebo got to work cleaning on the carpet. With Schlatt tucked away in the suitcase and an ungodly amount of blood pooling inside of it, Tebo got to work on cleaning the carpet. He located the bleach inside the fridge. Why it was placed there was beyond Tebo. All he knows is that's where it had been since he was a kid, and that's where it went. He vaguely remembers Schlatt and Quackney making jokes about it being their favorite drink. Tubbo was really never fond of that joke. He found it to be rather unfunny, and grabbed it. He also grabbed a sponge and a paper towel and a bowl of warm water and got to work. Tubbo scrubbed at the carpet with a combination of bleach and water until his arms hurt and the carpet was torn and shaggy. It wasn't red anymore, though, so that was good. He then got to work on the couch, repeating the same motions until it physically hurt to continue. While there is a bit of red staining the fabric, it wouldn't be enough to be noticeable, nor identifiable as blood, so Tubbo decided it would be good enough and carried on. Finally, Tubbo tossed his bloodied clothing, glass bottle, and any other shards he could find into the suitcase before zipping it shut. He went over the plan in his mind again, marking off items like a checklist. Suitcase? Yes. Bloodied clothing? Yes. Bottle? Yes. Dead body? Yup. Bloodstains? Gone. That should be everything. Tubbo tilted the suitcase upright with aching arms, turning it onto its wheels and dragging it towards the exit of the apartment. He turned off all the lights and grabbed the car keys hanging off a nail jammed into the wall, locking the door behind him as he made his way into the hallway. Tubbo was thankful Schlatt was never rich enough to purchase the apartments on the higher floors, making the trip towards the outside world all the easier. It didn't take long for Tubbo to get to the car either. No one had said a word to him, or even saw him for that matter, making the trip down the hall all the easier because Schlatt was heavy as hell, gods. The old SUV Schlatt used to drive years ago, before the alcoholism, was parked in the very back corner of the parking lot, untouched for who knows how long. Tubbo was thankful he was even able to get the trunk open. With a grunt and essentially all of Tubbo's willpower, he lifted the suitcase onto the back. The back of the car dipped heavily as the suitcase was set down, almost looking as if it was going to tip backwards and crush Tubbo instantly. It didn't, thankfully. Or not thankfully? Tubbo was still debating whether or not to go through with the escape plan after driving into the river, and hopped into the driver's seat of the car. Now, admittedly, driving wasn't Tubbo's forte. In fact, Tubbo's only driven once in his life, and in that one time he managed to hit a fence and open his door right into someone riding a bike, and thus knocking them over and sending them to the ER for stitches. So, yeah, no, driving wasn't the best way to go about this, but Tubbo wasn't about to lug a dead body onto a train, and so it'd have to work for now. Besides, Tubbo's pretty sure he still remembers which pedal is the gas and which is the brake, and the rest is pretty standard. Tubbo's played enough Mario Kart at Tommy's place to know how to steer, and drift and mini turbo in the most effective ways and take the tightest of corners, and Tubbo sticks the key into the ignition and twists. And to his surprise, the car actually starts, which is probably something he should have taken into account before basing his entire plan around the use of a car. Many miracles, and Tubbo would like to have as many of those as possible tonight. Either way, Tubbo takes his car out of park after accidentally stepping on the gas pedal, causing the engine to roar loudly, and rolls forward, pulling out of the parking lot and making his way onto the road, without signaling, because, to be quite honest, Tubbo doesn't really remember how to do that part, not that he did it much when he was learning anyway, which caused Quackity, who was driving with him, to freak out multiple times, leaving his hands white-knuckled as he clung on to the handle above the door for the entirety of the lesson. Now on the street, Tubbo does his best to figure out the quickest route to the river. If I go down the main road, take a left, drive for a bit, and take a right, I should theoretically be able to reach it. But then again, main roads are going to have a few people on them, even though it's late, and my driving is shit, so... Instead of turning right into the direction of the main road, Tubbo turns left. He'll only have to cross over at once, and from there he can just take less commonly used roads to get there. Plus, the speed limit is lower, meaning Tubbo driving at a solid 40 kilometers an hour will actually make some sort of sense. While Tubbo isn't opposed to speeding, he also isn't a fan of crashing, and going under the speed limit is probably the best way to avoid that on empty nights like these. So 40 will be the way to go. Tebo's thankful tonight is actually fairly quiet. As he drives down the dark streets of his neighborhood, he's oddly surprised to see that no one is out walking, which is rather unusual considering the area he lives in, but he thinks it to be another mini miracle, giving him the leeway to make a few mistakes in the step of his whole plan, where he is definitely susceptible to many and all mistakes. Case in point, getting the car out of the parking lot and forgetting to use the turn signal, plus driving 10 kilometers over the speed limit. As he approaches a stop sign, coming to a full stop and looking both ways, good, Tebo turns on the radio. He may have just killed his father, but he's not a sociopath, and a completely silent drive sounds generally miserable. The music that comes on is quiet and a little staticky, which is pretty normal in a neighborhood that doesn't even have functioning streetlights and is cursed with god-awful pavement. Oh, gods. Tebo's never realized how bad it is until he's shaken around like a snow globe on his way to the stop sign. However, beneath the layer of static is a relatively pleasant-sounding song, the main instrument being piano, but there's also hints of drums playing along with the swingy sort of rhythm. The singer's voice is quite nice, too, soft but growing aggressive, almost desperate as they reach the bridge before the last chorus, and Tebo finds himself doing his best to sing and tap along as he drives. Driving while distracted isn't a good idea in general, but Tebo driving with anything less than an undivided mind is even worse. It's another mini miracle that he makes it across the main road through an intersection alive with an untouched car. Tebo lets out the breath he held on his way through the intersection, shoulders sagging. He checks the mirror and is even more relieved to see that no one is behind him. It's just him, his headlights, functioning streetlights. He's finally made it out of his neighborhood. And fog. Thick fog. It wasn't this bad back at home, but it seemed from the moment he crossed the main road, the further he drove, the thicker the fog got. Tebo could hardly see 100 meters in front of him. Just fog. But instead of finding it unsettling, Tebo finds it fitting. This is what he imagined killing someone and burying their body would feel like. It feels like a movie, a work of fiction. He should really just write this whole thing down as a pitch to a director, because he's driving down an empty street in a shitty car at 4 in the morning with a body in his trunk, and he's gonna drive himself into a river. But for now, he's just gonna listen to some good ass music on the old ass radio, and it's fucking perfect. Tebo smiles to himself, keeping his eyes on the road. This is the most at peace he's felt with himself while sober. Sure, the circumstances weren't fantastic, but Tebo's a sucker for aesthetics and cheap shit, and this checks all those boxes, and fuck. If everything goes to shit after tonight, at least Tebo would have this moment ingrained into his memory forever. And sue him for thinking the trees look pretty when their green color is tinted a little lighter with the fog. And sue him for finding comfort in the haziness and lessened vision. And sue him for enjoying these moments because, for all he knows, for all he's sure of, these moments will very well may just be his last. Behind the fog, Tebo sees two bright dots appear. His first thought is police, but the two dots are a normal color and there's no red or blue accompanying them, so that essentially rules it out. His next thought is, oh, fuck, there's a car, I'm gonna crash in this is goodbye for me, world, you were shit anyways. But the car emerges from the fog and passes him with no issue, not even a scratch on the side of the SUV. And how did that song go again? Jesus has the wheel or something? Whatever it is, Tebo considers the passing without injury another mini miracle. Tebo reaches another stop sign, turning right this time, and figuring out how to use his blinker. And while he may have accidentally driven into another lane a little, there's no one there anyway, so it's probably not that bad. Tebo can just blame that on being tired if anyone asks about it. It's fine. His drive continues, and Tebo, beneath the fog, can make out the general shape and look of the houses, and oh, wow, these are substantially nicer than the apartment. They're actual houses, separated and made with siding with 2 stories and dormers and tiled roofs and nice lawns and nice cars parked in the perfectly paved driveways. It makes Tubbo feel wildly out of place. But then again, he's got a dead body in his trunk, So at this point, Tubbo doesn't think there's any place he fits in, besides, like, prison, probably. People who've done this thing of go to prison, but the people who are in prison for this kind of thing got caught. And that will be the difference between Tubbo and the other people. So, no, there's no place to fit in. The thought is both comforting and terrifying, and it multiplies tenfold as Tubbo makes his turn into a gated community, the one by the river. Tubbo wasn't meant to drive through here. If he had gone down the route he was originally going to, he would have reached the river without going through this place. This place that probably has high security and cops parked around the corner to protect the rich bastards from getting some of their shit stolen. He reckons that if he had taken a different turn somewhere else, he could have reached the river without driving through this place. But at the same time, seeing the nice places before you possibly die doesn't sound like horrible, so maybe Tubbo won't attempt to perform a U-turn at 4 in the morning. And the houses are much nicer than the ones Tubbo had seen before. They're basically mini mansions, built with brick and boasting sculptures on pillars and beautiful flora and gardens. Cars that aren't parked in the double garages look expensive. Tubbo knows they're expensive, with pricey logos stamped on the back of each and every one he drives by. But Tubbo can't get distracted now. He's too close to the river to lose focus. Adrenaline finds his way into its veins, and he shuts off the radio and steps a little harder on the gas pedal. The fog is still thick here, if not thicker, but Tubbo's so close, and if he wants this to end quickly, he's gonna have to kick it up to 50, 60, 70. He's speeding, and he knows he's speeding, and he knows that this probably isn't a great idea, not even a good or a meh one. This is just straight up bad. Bad, bad, bad idea. This is going to get Tubbo caught, or end up going to kill another man, or this is going to end poorly and Tubbo can feel it in his aching stomach that this is going to end poorly. Yet he keeps driving, with his white knuckles on the wheel and the gas pedal pressed down just enough to keep Tubbo cruising at 67 kilometers per hour. It's a mini miracle he's even made it this far in the first place. Quackity would be so... No, can't think about Quackity. Focus on the road. It's only one more left turn and then the river. One more turn and this can all be over. But maybe he can park just outside the river and take in the scenery and... No. Stop. Focus on the road. One mistake and it's over. You know that. Focus. 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 Dashed yellow lines. Focus on the dashed yellow lines. Focus on the stop sign ahead. Focus on the... To Tubbo's left, he spots a person walking on the sidewalk. Tubbo's eyes latch on to this person instantly, and as he drives by, he stays staring because this person looks so familiar. Split-dyed hair, two-tone skin, fancy-ass suit and tie. Tubbo's body is shot forward by an ear-splitting crunch that's made its way into his ears. The airbag pops out, cushioning his face as it shoots up towards the steering wheel. The car's engine has stopped its purring and Tubbo sits up, and suddenly there's no more air in his lungs and he feels a bit sick and... Fuck! Tubbo curses under his breath. His heart is beating fast enough to make his chest hurt, and his heavy breathing isn't quite helping either. There's an ache in his legs and ankles, likely from the impact of the crash. And shit, Tubbo's just crashed. He's crashed just like he knew he would, and now he's to deal with legal papers and all that. Why couldn't he have driven off the river and died from impact? That would have been worlds easier, but no, he just had to crash and survive at that. Right in front of that weird guy from the train. Even better. Tubbo turns his head to look out his window. Through teary eyes, when did Tubbo start crying anyway? Why was he crying? He's fine, just a little surprised, that's all. Tubbo can see the stranger running towards him, checking both sides of the street before crossing the road, heading in Tubbo's direction. Tubbo unclips his seatbelt, opens the driver's door, and stepping out just as the stranger arrives to his side. And his leg definitely was not in pain before, but as he stands, a sharp pain shoots up his leg from his ankle, causing him to lean over and rest his weight on the undamaged side of the car. Are you all right? The stranger asks, slightly winded from the pathetically short distance of running. They seem genuinely concerned, though, which means they're of no threat. This adds another mini miracle to the list, which Tubbo really wishes he could have had a few minutes ago. But he supposes you win some and you lose some, and it's almost fitting considering Tubbo's life that he loses one of the most important things just before his happy ending as well. I'm fine, Tubbo replies, forcing a smile. He still keeps his guard up. Tubbo takes a deep breath, trying to calm his racing heart because it's starting to make his legs feel like jelly, and falling over completely wouldn't be too great right now. Are you sure? I mean, you hit that lamppost at pretty high speed and your ankle doesn't look too okay. Tubbo looks down at his ankle, then at the lamppost. How the pole is now dented and the entire right side of the front of the car is crushed into the shape of the pole. Tubbo never would have suspected that much damage to occur. I mean, blow out a headlight, sure, but crash the whole front corner in? That seems a bit much. I'll be okay, genuinely, Tubbo reassures, but the stranger still looks at him with concern. My place isn't too far from here, so if you can, or maybe if your car's still drivable, if you're comfortable, of course, you could drive it to mine, because I don't think there's that many tow trucks. Pause. This guy wants to tow the car with the body in the back? Absolutely not. Even though the thought of driving is enough to make Tubbo panic, he doesn't have another choice. And the thing looks mostly drivable, so that's good. Yeah, Tubbo interjects, cutting the stranger off before they can finish their sentence. Yeah, okay, we can drive back. Just give me directions and I'll be good, yeah? Okay. Yeah, okay, I'll lead you and all that. Tibbo nods, stepping back into the driver's seat and lowering the window, turning the car back on, which works, mini miracle, giving the stranger a thumbs up. Show me the way, boss man. The stranger walks down the street beside the car, waving Tibbo along as he navigates the steering wheel with the airbag in the way. It's not much worse than driving regularly. In fact, with Tibbo's experience, it doesn't make much a difference at all. Tebo's still shit at making cars move properly without making himself want to throw up and die, especially turning. And Tebo's world only partially crumbles, and the stranger directs him to turn into their pretty cement-tiled mosaic driveway. Tibble pulls through as straight as he can, lining himself up well enough with one of the two garage doors, which he wasn't asked to do, but is glad that he did anyway, because the stranger comes up to his window and asks, do you want to park in my garage? To which Tubbo, obviously, needing to hide a body somewhere that isn't just out in the open, nods to. He watches as the stranger grabs some keys out of their pocket, hitting a button attached to the keychain, prompting the garage door to open. Tubbo then pulls forward, surely but slowly, into this open space beside the other car parked beside him. It's just as fancy as all the other ones, but looks just as unused as the SUV was before tonight, which is odd, because you'd think that pretentious pricks who live in neighborhoods like these would want to show their fancy-ass cars off as much as they could. Tibbo turns off the car and steps out again, wincing as he sets his right foot on the cement floor. He stumbles a little away from the direction of the car, but the stranger is quick in catching him. Are you sure you're okay? The stranger asks, helping Tubbo stand back up and placing their hand around Tubbo's shoulder. It's as cold as Schlatt's was when Tubbo was fitting him into the suitcase, but it's comforting. My ankle's a little fucked up right now, but it'll be all right, Tubbo replies with a small smile. A genuine one, though. Okay, well, I have a first aid kit inside, so I could, like, wrap it up and all that, help with the pain and all, the stranger offers. As long as that's okay with you, of course. Communicating with strangers after you've just dumped your father's body inside their garage probably isn't the best idea, especially after they offered to bring you inside. And it goes against every bit of common sense in Tubbo's mind to agree to this. But at the same time, how much of a stranger really is this person, considering Tubbo saw them last night on the train? And how bad can they be when they've been so kind and caring? Sure, Tubbo answers, smile widening. Thank you. With a nod, the stranger helps Tubbo inside. They unlock the garage door and step into the kitchen. It's unusually dark inside the house, with all the windows that should be lighting up at least a little bit of the floor completely shut, keeping any and all light out. Which is odd, because you'd think a place with so many windows you'd be a fan of natural light. And while it may have been a little weird at first, Tibbo is now glad that the stranger is holding on to him, guiding him through the dark. They're navigating this place surprisingly well, considering it's pitch black. Eventually, a light is turned on, and Tibbo squints his eyes a little as he adjusts the lamp illuminating a fair portion of the living room. It looks fairly cozy, with big, plush couches and a warm color scheme. There's a fireplace and a television on one wall, a bookshelf or two on another, and mirror-covered windows. Here, sit here for a moment, the stranger says softly, guiding Tibbo to sit on one of the chairs. It's just as comfortable as it looks, and Tibbo feels like he could absolutely melt into it. I'll be back, the stranger says before taking off down the hall. Tibbo's eyes follow them until they disappear behind a corner. He's briefly given a chance to take in the rest of the place. Just from the look of the exterior, Tibbo knew these places were fancy, so the trimmed walls painted a warm beige accompanied by polished wooden floors was almost expected. The furniture, while there wasn't much, looked and felt expensive, and wood side tables with patterns carved into them to match, resembling ones you'd see in those fancy-ass old buildings, and a dining room that looked straight out of the Queen's palace. No, seriously, the dining room was insane. Tubbo's never had a dining room, just a living room with a coffee table that was on the brink of losing its legs. So his only point of reference of what a dining room should look like was television shows in Tommy's house. But even in the shows, the dining rooms would usually consist of a small round table and some foldable chairs, or, on the nicer end, a long wooden table with leather chairs. And then there was this guy, with their big fuck-off chandelier hanging over a stupidly long wooden table with some regal-looking chairs. You know the ones with the red velvet cushions and the gold accents, a flower pot with a single flower in it, and those cabinets with fine china just sitting on display. It was ridiculous. Although Tubbo noticed the room itself looked fairly unused. Maybe this guy just didn't have many guests around, which is a little odd considering their casual attire appeared to be a suit and tie. Now that Tubbo thinks about it, their lack of dining room use isn't the only odd thing about this guy. I mean, the way they look is odd, but besides their appearance, which is a cheap shot to go in the first place, the guy just, doesn't have any paintings. You'd think a guy with a place like this, they'd have some paintings by Van Gogh or something. Maybe Monet or whatever. No, just nothing. Like, not even a family portrait. The dude has nothing on their walls. And at this point, between the two of them, Tubbo feels like the lesser psychopath. The stranger returns with a decently sized first aid kit in hand. They sit down on the couch adjacent to Tubbo, setting the kit down on the coffee table and popping it open. It seems brand new, but from the design of the products inside, it looks ancient. Maybe the guys just got a knack for vintage items, who knows. They remove a roll of some kind of bandage from the kit, then proceed to stare at it for a bit, as if in thought. Tubbo stares back in silence. Okay, I'm sorry, I was about to wrap your ankle for you, but that's a little weird. Plus, I don't really know how to do it, so, but here. The stranger holds the bandage out in front of Tubbo. You can, if you know how. You can do it. And neither of us know how to, then we'll figure it out, I guess. They laugh awkwardly. Tubbo cracks a smile as well, taking the tensor bandage from their hand. Tubbo removes his shoe, sock, and rolls up his pant leg just a little. With practiced swiftness, Tubbo wraps his ankle up, tightly enough to give it the support he needs, but a little loose enough as to not cut off his circulation, and secures the end of the bandage in place. He's done before the stranger can finish feeling awkward about their attempt at communication. And Tubbo will admit, wrapping your ankle in actual tensor bandage as opposed to a strip of wet t-shirt feels better and is much easier to properly pull off. Who would have thought? There's yet another awkward pause. Everything is quiet in this hour, quiet enough to hear the hum of electricity buzzing through the lamp, quiet enough to hear your own heartbeat. Awkward silences must be a regular thing for this guy, because the stranger seems relatively unfazed. A little uncomfortable, sure, but the overall unsurprised by the silence that's fallen. Tubbo decides to break it. Thanks for helping out, he says, catching the stranger's attention immediately. I'm not the greatest driver at the best of times, so, it was really a matter of time when I was going to crash. I'm just glad it was a lamppost rather than a person. The stranger laughs. Yeah, that's a really good point, actually. I'm sure the lamppost will recover. Tubbo snorts. Well, I'd sure hope so, Tubbo adds, then a pause, and then, I'm Tubbo, by the way. Tubbo extends an arm, prompting the other to shake his hand. My name's Rambu. Rambu takes his hand, giving it a small shake before both their hands drop down to their sides. Nice to meet you. Your hands are freezing, Tubbo says, which probably isn't the most polite thing to say to someone you've just introduced yourself to, but Tubbo has a point. The guy's hands are freezing. Right, yeah, they tend to be like that, I think, Rambu replies, averting his gaze as he speaks. Yours, warm, a little. And the words are awkward as hell, but for some reason Tubbo finds it sort of endearing. Really, they feel fucking cold to me. Tubbo presses his hands against his neck, warming them. They're still cold and clammy. Oh, Rambu says, as if he hadn't noticed in the slightest. Geez, does this guy just have a perma-cold hands? It must sound miserable. If yours are cold, I can make some tea, if you want, Rambu offers, though it sounds more like a question. Sure, Tubbo chirps. Rambu nods and stands, heading back to the kitchen. Gods, this guy's nice. He's like inhumanly nice. He watched Tubbo drive his car into a lamppost, then, without knowing anything about him, invited him to park his dinky car in his fancy-ass garage attached to his fancy-ass house, invited him into said fancy-ass house, gave him something to wrap his ankle in because he noticed he was injured, then offered him some tea. Literally, who does that? Especially to a murderer of all things. Or, not murderer. Tubbo's not a murderer, he was just caught in a bad mood at a bad time and just happened to lash out in a bad way. Schlatt had it coming for him anyway. Tubbo takes a deep breath. Step one of continuing to live a peaceful, prison-free life was getting rid of the physical evidence. The second step was to get rid of the mental evidence, to ease your guilty conscience. He should probably tell someone about what he's done at some point in the near future before he ends up taking himself to the police. Tubbo reckons it'll be a while before he sleeps easy at night. He didn't plan on sleeping much tonight anyways, if at all, and those plans would be solidified if the tea that Rambu comes back with is caffeinated. Rambu sits down on the couch and sets 2 cups of tea down. The plates and cups look both like family heirlooms, each set painted colorful flowers and rims accented with gold. The tea inside is dark, definitely a little too dark for Tubbo's liking, and he feels rude asking, but he asks anyway. Do you have any cream? Rambu looks up at him, their eyes meeting for a brief moment before he looks away. No. Sorry, no. Rambu replies. Any sugar? Tubbo adds. Uh, also, no. Sorry about that. Really, really sorry. Rambu sounds genuinely sorry, as if he's apologizing for kicking Tubbo's puppy instead of not having essential ingredients. And if Tubbo feels bad about asking before, then he definitely feels bad now, having to listen to Rambu apologize for something that really doesn't matter a whole lot. though it does seem a little odd because one person doesn't have any sugar or milk in this house. Don't worry about it, it's fine, Tubbo dismisses, waving his hand. He picks up the cup, bringing the plate up with it with the other hand. He's careful not to drop it, though his hands still shake a little, adrenaline from the crash and all that. He hasn't really been given a chance to calm down. Tubbo takes a sip. The tea is still hot and more bitter than he'd like, but the cup warms his hand and the rest of his body as it goes down. It even helps in calming the shaking in his hands. Tubbo sighs as he sets the tea back down. The silence between them is comfortable, but it doesn't feel right. It's 4 in the morning, you're drinking tea in a stranger's house, of course something's going to feel off, Tubbo reminds himself. Still, he strikes up a conversation. I think I saw you on the train last night, Tubbo says. It's not the greatest conversation starter, but it's something, and it makes the sound of Tubbo's heart beating in his ears a little quieter. The one going downtown, a little close to midnight, yeah? Yeah, that was me, Rompu replies, smiling, though looking a little ashamed. When I saw you in the car after I sort of recognized you and all that. Tubbo considers telling Ranbu that he's the reason why he crashed in the first place, but based on the fact that Ranbu's apologized profusely for not having any milk or sugar, Tubbo can only assume that telling him that would make things worse. So he saves that part for another day, maybe a future story time or two with Tommy. Yep, I recognized you too. You're very easily recognizable, I reckon, Tubbo says. Despite the fact that Tubbo didn't even know Ranbu's name a few minutes ago, he feels like he's talking to an old acquaintance right now. Am I? Ranbu questions, seemingly surprised at the comment. Well, yeah, I'd say so. You've got a bit of an odd-looking face, but, like, not in that way, you know? I don't mean it in a bad way. I'm just saying that most people don't have skin that's literally white on one side and sort of gray on the other. You get me? Mm-hmm. Rambu nods. I guess you're right. Yeah, I also get that you don't mean it in that way. You're just, yeah. Yep, you're a funky-looking guy, Rambu. Funky. Rumbu repeats, smiling as he raises his teacup to his lips, taking another sip before adding, I haven't heard that word in a while. It sounds like he's talking to himself more than Tubbo. Tubbo cocks his head to the side, confused. What do you mean by that? Rumbu seems to register what he's just said, his eyes widening, setting his teacup back down on the matching plate. Oh, I mean that, and my friend used to say that word all the time, and it's been a while since I've seen him, so Ranbu doesn't seem entirely convinced of his own words, but Tubbo decides not to press further. For all he knows, said friend could be dead, and that's a topic Tubbo certainly wants to avoid. The conversation ends there. It was a good attempt, Tubbo thinks. He doesn't reckon Ranbu's too fond of conversation anyway. So it's probably better to just sit in silence for now. Tubbo can relax, let himself be present in this peaceful moment, and figure things out when it comes time to do that. In the quiet, Tubbo can hear the clink of porcelain against wood as he picks up his plate and teacup. He can also hear the clink of Rambu's as he lifts his own teacup, and another clink to follow as the porcelain hits his teeth, particularly hard as well. Ouch. Once Ranbu finishes his sip, he sets his teacup and plate down entirely. He looks up at Ranbu, once again their eyes meeting for barely a second before Ranbu breaks eye contact. Sorry, excuse me for a moment, Ranbu rushes to say, covering his mouth with his hand. No worries, bossman, go ahead, Tubbo responds, watching as Ranbu scurries away down the hall immediately. The teacup must have hurt real bad, then. Tubbo sighs, finishing the rest of his tea in a few more sips. The water has cooled down a fair amount, making it drinkable without causing 7th-degree burns, while still warming you as it goes down. The best temperature, if you ask Tubbo. Tubbo is not entirely sure how long Ranbu is actually gone for. He doesn't bother to check his phone, having it powered down before he left. But based on how a small sliver of incredibly faint light begins to creep through the slits of the drapes, Thibaut can only assume that it's somewhere around 5 in the morning. He's long since stopped shaking, and the feeling of Rambu's leather couch around his body has grown to feel more like home than anything. He could probably become one with it right now if he wanted to. Becoming a chair doesn't sound half bad, to be honest. Chairs didn't have responsibilities, or sprained ankles. Rambu comes back eventually, though, looking a little more at ease. He sits back down on his spot and drinks the rest of his tea quickly. It's likely gone cold by now. Thibaut yawns. The tea was not caffeinated. Rambu looks through the cracks of the curtains to see the light fading in as well. This seems to shock him, and he quickly sets down his plate and teacup. I'm sorry, I don't want to sound rude or anything like that, but you should probably be getting home. Rambu chokes out. Sorry, I'm not like kicking you out or anything. I have to be somewhere soon and I need you to. Rambu sighs. I can get you home if you want. I'm not sure that you want to drive right now with your ankle and all that. Thibaut considers the offer. It'd probably be best for him not to drive again with his ankle. Plus, he's getting sleepy, and like he told Rambu, he can't drive at the best of times. Besides, a little more time with Rambu wouldn't hurt, right? Sure, Thibaut replies, rising a little too quickly, head spinning and vision darkening in some spots. Gods, when was the last time he'd eaten anything? Rambu's there with his arms out though, ready to catch him in an instant, and Thibaut appreciates that. Like, really appreciates that. I'm just gonna make sure my car is like clean enough to be in. Just wait outside and I'll be there in a moment, Rambu says, leading Thibaut to the front door. He unlocks it and gestures for Thibaut to step outside. Thibaut seats himself on the concrete steps. He takes in the night air, letting it fill his lungs completely before exhaling. A cigarette wouldn't be half bad right now, as much as Tommy would berate him for it. Without one is good, too. Thibaut just waits and takes in the scenery, the stupidly grand houses, the stupidly expensive cars right on display, the stupidly trimmed and proper-looking lawns. This certainly isn't Thibaut's neighborhood, but he can appreciate the aesthetics of it. It isn't long before the garage door's opening and Rambu's car is backing out of it. Thibaut rises at the sight of it and heads down the rest of the stairs, approaching the passenger side door and sliding onto it, sitting himself on the leather seat. The car still smells new, but like an old kind of new, as if this thing was bought years ago but wasn't used enough to get the new car smell out of it, so now it just permanently smells like that. Which isn't a bad thing. It's just another thing about Rambu that strikes Thibaut as odd. The interior of the car is rather fancy, though, mostly made of leather, with each stitch visible and neat. There also appears to be a gear shift, which Thibaut thinks way out of fashion years ago, but he's pretty sure they're more common among fancier cars, so really, it's not that out of place. Rambu's a much better driver than Thibaut. Not only does he remember to use his turn signal, but his turns, acceleration, and shift between each gear is smooth, and for a moment Thibaut feels like he's truly in a movie, but not a horror movie, rather than interesting coming-of-age film. Maybe Thibaut really should take up becoming a director. Thibaut also feels a little safer with Rambu behind the wheel, which greatly helps in easing his newfound anxiety related to cars, courtesy of none other than himself. So, where am I headed? Rambu asks as he approaches the gate to his neighborhood. There's no one around at this hour, so he's not worried about pulling out into the street just yet. Thibaut hesitates. This isn't really part of the plan, if he's being honest. Like, he wasn't even planning on being alive at this point, let alone in some rich guy's car. He knows he's not going home, though, that's for sure. So, Thibaut replies, I'll just give you the directions as we go. Turn left here. Rambu turns left on the street. Tebo tells him where to turn right at the intersection, and Rambu does. Tebo says right, Rambu turns right. And after a while, the silences once broken by Tebo's directions turns into music from the radio playing in casual conversation, which turns them into going back and forth with jokes and anecdotes, Tebo now having to continue giving instructions through laughter. Turn here? Rambu asks, voice lilted a little higher with joy clear in his tone. Nope, next one, Tebo replies, shaking off the rest of his laughter. It's a sense of belonging that Tebo hasn't felt in years. No, his entire life. Because sure, Tebo has a friend, Tommy, but he and Tommy took years of school and hours of detention together before they really clicked. But this thing that Tebo has going on with Rambu, a comfort that formed almost immediately after meeting him, that was a mini miracle. It could be, of course, Tebo seeing this weird dude on the train, then seeing him a day later, but Tebo likes to think that there's something else entirely, and so be it. He's a kid, he's allowed to dream. But, as Tebo's learned, nothing in life lasts forever, and neither does this belonging. It should be on your left. Here, Tebo says, eyes scanning the houses they pass in at an antagonizingly slow speed. Oh, right here, Tebo chirps, and Rambu immediately flicks on his turn signal, turning into the rough driveway in front of one of the townhouses, Tommy's place. Well, Rambu says, putting the car into park and clapping his hands together, and without having to say more, Tebo knows what he means. Tebo unbuckles his seatbelt and is about to get out when he pauses. Now that he thinks about it, chances are he's never going to see this guy again. He's just met Rambu and now he's leaving him, and for some reason it feels like Tebo's leaving a longtime friend, only to know he'll be seeing him at a later date. But that just isn't the case with Rambu. The city they live in is big enough so that even if they were going to go looking for each other, chances are they're never going to come across one another again. Now, yes, Tebo can technically just show up at Rambu's place, but that would be hella weird and hella awkward. So, no, he will not be doing that. And maybe Tebo should have lied a little when giving directions. Should have sent him and Rambu on more of an adventure rather than a 20-minute drive. Thank you, Rambu, Tebo admits. He can't remember the last time he said those words to someone and genuinely meant it. Thank you for the hospitality and the tea and the ride to home. Just thank you, man. It really means a lot. No problem, Rambu replies. I mean, I know that if I ran into a lamppost, I'd want someone to, help out and all that. I'm just treating you how I want to be treated, you know? Yeah, I get it, but yeah, no, really, thank you. They look at each other, and this time Rambu doesn't immediately break eye contact. He lasts about 3 seconds this time, which is a record, sure. When Tebo decides the staring gets too awkward, he steps out of the car. Tebo waves his hand at Rambu, Rambu waving back. Tebo then heads to the front door and is about to knock when he realizes, shit, is Tommy even awake? The hell, is anyone in this household awake? It's 5:30 in the morning, and Tebo doesn't even think Tommy's dad is up yet, which is saying a lot considering his father is quite the early bird. Tebo can see the headlights of Rambu's car continuing to shine behind him, lining his shadow, and of course Rambu's one of those people that waits to make sure the other person gets inside safely. Of course he is. Worth a shot, Tebo thinks. Tebo knocks on the door. His knuckles only tap on the wood once before he hears the door unlock and open. The headlights fade away.